So, what's the use of model or uniform acts in bill drafting? When drafting new laws in the state of California or elsewhere, sometimes groups in those drafting legislation may turn to model laws or uniform acts. They also may review similar laws adopted by the federal government or certainly in other states. And as you can probably imagine, there are positive and negative aspects of using these other laws when drafting statutes in California. Although bill drafting requires creativity in some instances, if a statute's working well in another jurisdiction, it may not be necessary to, as we say, recreate the wheel. Similar laws in California, as well as those in other states, might be useful to utilize. And these uniform or model acts come from a variety of sources. The Uniform Law Commission, the ULC, which is known as the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws, was established way back in 1892 to provide states with nonpartisan, well-conceived and well-drafted legislation that brings clarity and stability to critical areas of state statutory law. The ULC has promulgated more than 300 uniform and model acts on numerous subjects, from commerce to family and domestic relations to real estate transaction, trust and estates, and alternative dispute resolution. According to the ULC, a uniform act is one that seeks to establish the same law on a subject among various jurisdictions. An act is designated as a uniform act if there's substantial reason to anticipate enactment in a large number of jurisdictions, and uniformity of the provisions of the act among the various jurisdictions is the principal objective of the drafters. The UCL is the primary drafter of uniform laws to promote uniformity among state laws in particular areas. The ULC also explains that an act is designated as a model act if uniformity may be a desirable objective, though not the principal or main objective. The act may promote uniformity and minimize diversity, even though a significant number of jurisdictions may not adopt the act in its entirety. And the purposes of the act can be substantially achieved even though it's not adopted in its entirety by every state. These model acts are proposed by a number of organizations, including the American Bar Association, the American Law Institute, and others. While uniform and model acts have different needs and purposes, they share the common goal of carefully drafted laws that may be enacted by state legislatures across the country. As a result, a state legislature can enact them without much change or not enact them at all, or obviously enact some or part of them with modifications. While uniform laws are intended to be adopted in their entirety, model acts are often used as a starting point, if you will, for state laws and are usually not adopted in their entirety by a state legislature. Regardless of whether the bill drafter reviews a model act or a uniform law, using these legislative precedents from other jurisdiction or these national organizations will likely require some modification. In other words, a bill drafter may not want to simply cut and paste from one of these model or uniform acts without taking into account several factors for their jurisdiction. For example, in California, is the act consistent with California's method of drafting statutes or modifications of the language necessary? Does the model or uniform act have any provisions that might be inconsistent with existing California statutes? Does the act contain any ambiguous provisions or that are defined elsewhere in California law? In jurisdictions that have adopted one of these acts, how have their courts interpreted the act's provisions? And would California want them interpreted in the same manner? How does the model or uniform act fit within the existing statutory scheme? And are terms in the act consistent with definitions of terms elsewhere? Are the rules for interpreting the act consistent with guidelines of interpreting statutes in your jurisdiction? So depending on the state legislature, uniform laws and model acts can be important starting points for a bill drafter. And depending on legislators in a particular state, some or all of these acts may be utilized. But again, it's important to remember that there may be differences, some minor, some significant, that have to be taken into account when a bill drafter is using model or uniform act language in their particular jurisdiction.